Greetings to you all. Welcome to the second virtual field day, which is being hosted by CITCO. So during this time of the year, it is usually a time when we exhibit the exceptional genetics of CITCO varieties established across the country. But in a bid to move with what has been happening with the situation that we are being presented with COVID-19, we have decided to utilize digital technology to exhibit the goodness of CITCO genetics across the globe. Hence, the onset of these virtual field days. So last week, we conducted a virtual field day at a commercial farm in Headlands, where we exhibit exceptional genetics established there of SC727 and SC659. This week, we are going to be conducting this field day at a communal farm in Masvingo. This farm is at farm number 199, Mushagashi West in Masvingo. This is in a bid to bring about inclusivity of different farming groups, because at CITCO, we believe we have genetics that are suited for every farming program, be they commercial or communal farmers, and every agroecological region. With that in mind, I'm going to hand you over to the farmer who's going to discuss about the crops that they established. Kindly note that at a communal level, the farmer is going to be explaining in Shona, then I'll come in and interpret what the farmer will have said for the benefit of those participants who might not be able to understand Shona. So please don't drop out of this webinar. We'll be explaining everything that you're going to be seeing in English after we have heard from the speakers who will have explained what will be happening. So let's hear from the farmer. The farmer's name is Mr. Pasco Zoro from farm number 199, Mushagashi West in Masvingo, and he is a communal farmer.
Ndinonzi Pascal Zoro, ndiri murimi ari muMushagashi West. Purazi rangu rinonzi farm 199 Mushagashi West. Zvandiri muri kudaro, ndiri munhu murume anorarama neurema. Ndararama neurema kudaro, ndakawana rubatsiro kubva kucompany seed house inonzi CITCO. Yakandibatsira nokundipa mbeu, nokundipa advice, nokutenda zvakare kuno mudhumeni wangu anondibatisa vanonzi Mai Mukwende navamagavhu. VeCITCO vakandipa mbeu before the end of September. Saka pambeu yandakapiwa neveCITCO vakandipa mavarieties akati wandei. Inini mai vangu vanera shumba. Saka zvava kudaro apa mukomana unonzi Magavhu wakandipa mavarieties yawo 301 527, but mainly ini akandanga nchida kuti ndirime ndiyo yeshumba yemutumbu. Saka ndapiwa kudaro muna October, mvura yokutanga yeOctober kuno kutaka musi wa4 ndikazodzvara musi wa10 October. Nobva ndadzara shumba, ndakadzvara nzou chete. Saka ndaiti kana variety imwe neimwe ndaiva nezuva rayo rekuidzvara, nokuti ndaiti ndikadzvara musi mumwe chete zvikatsa zvose zvarova. Saka ndakatanga nzou nokutevera mai vacho shumba. Ndakamira pavariety yeCITCO inonzi nzou. Mbeu yakatsva, chandinoitendera yakatsva. Handina kuzombofunga kuti vanhu vazhinji vachiona tengiri vakafungidza diridzai, asi nokuda kwaMwari nokushingirira nerudzi rwembeu yakagadzirwa neCITCO yandipa go. CITCO handinhasi kutanga kundibatsira. CITCO yakandibatsira 2018, yakandipa mabhuramani 2 ikandicherera bhoo, vakasiya ramunoona tengi zvose zvakabva muCITCO. Yamunoona yatakabata i727 ndiyo yatiko zhinji yacho iri mumunda. Hatisati tatanga kuipedza kuikohwa, takamira kuti iome. Tine 301, tine 513 yaisati yabakwa ichiri girini. Saka mavarieties ese hatisati tamabata. Iri bago randakasumudzamo 727 ndio rine dutu riri pano ramuri kuona. Then rimwe dutu ramuri kuona iri 657 shumba tichiri kukohwa mumunda ichirimo. Then kwozouya 57 iri papapa iyi yamunoona iri pemirapo. Nderimwe dutu zvemumunda irimo. Tine 301 ne513 dzichiri girini. Saka takabirira kudzikohwa mbeu dzese idzodzo.
So we've just heard from the farmer, Mr. Zoro, how he established his crops. So in summary, Mr. Zoro was speaking about the relationship that he and Sitco and his agronomists in his area have. Over the past few years, Mr. Zoro has benefited through Sitco's corporate social responsibility programs, as well as the marketing initiatives of Sitco, by getting a tank for irrigation, as well as getting a borehole. So he is a farmer who is well equipped in terms of what he can use at his farm through the efforts of Sitco. So he also spoke about the fact that he is a farmer who lives with a disability, but that has not stopped him from embarking on profitable farming ventures. And he has also benefited through Sitco's demonstration plots that he has established over the years. This year, the farmer established SC301, an ultra early maturing variety. He also established SC419. He established as well SC555 and SC657, 659 in the medium maturity varieties, as well as SC727. So the crops that he was illustrating, the crop that he was holding is of SC727. He also then alluded to the fact that there were some crops that they had harvested that were heaped up from the SC657 variety. Harvesting is currently underway, and this is particularly because they established their crops in October. They got their first rains on the 4th of October, and on the 10th of October, the farmer started planting. He planted SC727 first, knowing that is a variety that would require the longest period to maturity. He then established what he termed his favorite varieties in the 600 series, because the 600 series, as is commonly called or is named the Shumba varieties, is associated with his totem. So he established the Shumba variety after the 727 variety. After that, he went on to establish the 500 series varieties, the 300 series varieties, as well as the 400 series varieties. The farmer also explained that the 727 established on the 10th of October underwent a bit of moisture stress in its early establishment, but he was surprised and highly commended the variety for having stood during the periods of moisture stress and a dry spell. He then also explained that he appreciated greatly the advice that he gets on a constant basis from Sitco agronomist for his area. The Sitco agronomist for his area is Mr. Magavu. And he also commended the agronomist from the ministry, who also comes in to assist him in terms of providing technical advice. So having said that, that is the brief that we got from the farmer. They established 400 series varieties, 300 series, 500 series, 600 and 700 series varieties, the whole wide spectrum, which is to say, Sitco has a variety for every cropping program, and the product basket is quite wide. With that in mind, let's move on to hear what the Sitco agronomist, Mr. Magavu, has to say about the varieties established by the farmer in Masvingo at Mushagashi West.
Zita rangu ndinonzi Godfrey Magavu, Sitco agronomist kana kuti murimisi wekambani yeSitco. Ndiri kuMasvingo. Zuva ranhasi tiri kuMushagashi West, muwadi 3, pamunda pababa vaPasco Dzoro, anova murimi weSitco. VaDzoro vakarima mavarieties eSitco akati wandei, anobva paSC301, SC419, SC555, SC657, SC659 neSC727. Ndo dzavakasarudza kuti vabva varime pamunda wavo. Paploti yatiri inoye pakarimwa mbeu yatotiyo SC727 nzou, huru yadzo muriga dzose mutsika panotinhira. Mbeu yatoti nzou imbeu yetoti irimwe munatural region 1, 2 and 3 kana tiri kuno kuMasvingo. Tobva tachiguma ipapo imakauti inodawo kune mvura yakandoti wandei, asi tiri muno muMasvingo. Varimi vari muno muMasvingo vari kubva vati charo vari munatural region 3 ne 4 vacho vazhinji vacho vari kutobva vatoti toida AC727 nemhaka yekuti ine miupi mihombe, vachiti nemhaka yekuti ine midzi inoenda pasi inobva yazoshingirira kuzuva, goho ravo robva raendeka. Mbeu yototi AC727 inopa goho rosvika iro pa 15 tons per hectare. Kuna vamwe varimi iri kutopfuura ipapo. AC727 varimi vari kuidira pakuti inotirira kuzuva vari kuno kumasvingo, saka muchiona vapasikodzoro vakabva vaisarudza. Inoshinga kuzuva zvakaraudzira, haikurumidze kudaira zuva. Tikatarisa vari kuna naHarare vanoirima ichibva namazuva anoita 150 days. Tiri kuno kumasvingo haizosviki mazuva anoita 150 days, inobva yandoti kurumidzei kuibva nokuda kweyatinoti altitude, kukwirira kana kuderera kwenzvimbo. Nemhaka yekuti kuno kumasvingo kwakandoti dererei kunenge kwava kudziya. Chero kumasvingo kuchindodziya saizvezvo hazvizokanganisi kureba kwemuguri. Yetinoti planned height, kureba kwechibage ndochinobva chandoti dererei zvishoma, hachizorebi zvakaraudzira, asi hazvizokanganise kureba kwemuguri. Muguri wedu unobva wabuda sezvauri wakareba seizvi. Inobva yaita iyo 30 centimeters. Rula zviri kureva zvokuti cobble height haina kukanganiswa, changoderera height yeplanned yedu. Regai tibve tachienda mukati memuguri wedu. Chokutanga ndofunga mukautarisa muguri uyu unenge une mitsara yakawanda. Ndo zvinoratidza kuti AC727 unenge ichirema muguri wacho. Zvakare ukatsokonyora tsanga dzacho dzinorema, dzinetoti high shelling percentage. Tobva tachipinda mukati memuguri. Tikatyora muguri wedu weAC727 tinotora tsanga iri kumhiri neiri kumhiri todzisanganisa. Tikatarisa tobva taona kuti dzinobva dzapesana. Ndo pane goho redu ipapa itoti shelling percentage. Kamukaona mbeu yaramba kusangana tsanga, zviri kureva zvokuti shelling percentage yakaderera. Asi kana dzasangana zvaita dzenzou dziri kutopesana idzi, goho riri pamusoro. Ndo patinoti ari manzou anenge ari magoho riri pamusoro. AC727 yabva yatibudira zvakanaka. Sezvatataura kuti murimi wedu wanhasi, baba vadzoro, vakarima mipanda yese yembeu kubva pama3 series kusvika pama7 series. Pano paploti yatava, paploti yakarimwa AC555, mbizi, manjenjenje, ganda ravasikana, chivaradzi chesango. Ndofunga mbizi munoiziva mese zvainoita, inoita mashura, kukapisa inobva yashingirira, kukanaya inobva yaita bhamba fesi sezvamuri kuona panapa. AC555 imbeu itsva iri mupanda wembizi, inotipa goho rakasimukira kupinda pamusoro pana naAC513 dzamajaira dziya. Goho reAC555 rinosvika iro pa 13-14 tons per hectare kana yaenza kurimwa zvakanaka. Right, mbeu inonzi AC555 yava pamusoro pedzimwe dzese mbizi. Chayakanakira inoshinga zvakaraudzira kuzuva. Yakauchikwa pane iye yatanga chitaura chiti climate change. Zviri kureva izvo kuti inomhanyidzana nemwaka, inomhanyidzana nemamiriro aita kunze. AC555 regai tibve tapinda mukati mayo, sezvo tataura isusu tichiti goho rayo rinosvika iro pa 14 tons per hectare. Ndofunga mukatarisa muguri wacho uri kuyevedza, mamiriro wakaita tarisai, wakanyatsa kuzvimba chaiko kusati tauvhura. Kunaka kwayaita tichitarisa, tarisai muone kumambizi Varieties. Iyi AC555 inovhara kumuromo kwayo, yetoti ine closed tip. Regai tibve tachiivhura tione mukati mayo kuti zvayakaita ipapa yakavhara mukati makanaka futi here. Regai tibve taifurura AC555 yedu. Tikaifurura AC555 tichaona kuti muguri wayo, tarisai muone, wareba kuenzana nemanzou chaiwo, asiyo iri mbizi. Tikaitarisa tichaona kuti ine isatsanga kusvika pamacheto peguri. Shanga imwe inosvika pakutoenda pamacheto chaipo apa, kumacheto kweguri ichingofila. Ndochokutanga mutsara wayo unenge wakareba, ndofunga mukatarisa ndo pane goho yogaita mitsara yakareba zvakare. Tikabva tachitarisa mitsara yeAC555 inoita iyo 14, imwe inenge ine 16. Tobva tochipinda mukati mayo AC555, ndonga maona chero tsanga yayo yakafara. Regai tibve tapinda mukati memupi wedu AC555. Rimwe guri rinenge rakafara, tsanga dzobva dzoita diki, asi pa555 tiri kuona kuti ine stout cob. Tikabva tachienda mukati mayo AC555 totora tsanga iri kumhiri neiri kumhiri kweAC555 tozitisanganayi. Tabva taona tsanga dzabva dzabvuma kusangana, zviri kureva izvokuti gora iri pamusoro yetoti pachirungu shelling percentage. Saka tiri kubva tachiti murimi akarima AC555 haana kurasika, ndo panoti go. Ndosaka tichizoti seedco, kuti seedco ndokuti mbeu, kuti mbeu ndokuti seedco. Pakurima kwese kuti zvinhu zvifambe go riende mberi zvinotanga nembeu chaiyo. Pano apa tapinda pampanda weshumba. Kuseedco pampanda weshumba tine mavarieties akati wandei anotiwo AC649, AC659, AC657 neAC661. Asi pano patiri mbeu yatiri kuona yakakohwewa nababa vadzoro inonzi AC657. AC657 muroora mutsva kuseedco yakabatana neAC661. AC657 imbeu inotirira zvakasimba kuzuva, haibatwe nezuva zvakaraudzira. Chayakanakira mbeu iyi iri shumba kudaro ine yetoti stay green kana tiri kumunda. Tichikohwa mashanga ari egreen kudaro, chibage chinenge chaoma, vanobva vachitora mashanga yacho akatoita green vondofidha kumombe dzavo. Zvinobva zvaita kuti vadzoro vachiwana go rakasemukira. At the same time zvipfuyo zvavo zvirobva zvatowana chikafu chinenge chine utano hwakakwanira, go ravo vatotsveta kumba. Tikaitarisa mbeu yetoti A6657 ine muguri murefu, inoyevedza kutarisa mumaziso. Makatoitarisa yakaita sezve yakaoma, yakatotsvukirira nechekare. Mbeu iyi it's a flend variety, ine tsanga dzinopenya. Kupenya hakune ine go zvako remurimi, asi zvine advantage kuti zvakanakira pakuti pane vanogocha chinobva chatsvukirira chiri chose pamwe chete, zvakare chinenge chitapira, zvakare ine flower yakawanda. Regai ndibve ndachiendai pakuipima, tinobva taona kuti shumba AC657 ingori rula zvakare, haina dambudziko. Yakangofanana, wakatoitarisa masonoka utoti inzou, asi chiri chimufana chayo nzou. Ishumba iyi mitsara yayo yakareba, mitsara yayo yakawanda, ndo panenge pane goho reshumba ipapa. Goho rayo reshumba rinopfuura 10 tons per hectare.
So we have just heard in detail from the seedco agronomist, Mr. Magavu, who is the agronomist for Masvingo province. And in case you've just joined us, we are going through a virtual field day at Mushagashi West in Masvingo, where in the first clip, we heard the farmer speaking about the varieties that they established and the fact that the varieties, he found them to be drought tolerant in periods of stress, especially at the start of the season, particularly mentioning 727. He also explained issues to do with the crop size, as well as the backup service that he was commending highly from the seedco agronomist, as well as the agronomist from the Ministry of Agriculture. So in the second clip, we were just hearing from our agronomist, Mr. Magavu, where he was explaining the different varieties that were established, some of the varieties that were established at Shagashi West by Mr. Zoro at a communal farm. So just as a summary, Magavu was speaking about the SC727 variety. The SC727 variety, he mentioned that it's a variety that can be established mostly in high potential areas, region 1, 2, and parts of region 3. It is also established during seasons when we have abundant rains, like what happened in this current season. Hence, it was established in Masvingo, and Magavu explained that some farmers, even in Masvingo, they prefer this variety because they found it to be drought tolerant during periods of stress, and it can, especially if the stress occurs during the vegetative growth stage, where it can undergo a drought tolerant ability of staying green for a longer period and not succumbing to permanent wilting. He also explained issues to do with the yield components, the 3 yield components, which are the high shelling out percentage, the high row number, as well as the long attractive crop. Mr. Magavu went on to take a long attractive crop from the many that were in the field of SC727, and he measured it against his hand, where he was saying that the variety was giving about 30 centimeters in length. He also then explained that the row numbers were quite high. He went on to break the cob in half and showcase what he was calling the shelling out percentage, where in shelling out percentage, this speaks to the area that is covered by the grain as opposed to the area covered by the cob. As we all rightfully know that the economic yield of maize or corn comes from the grain. So he was showing us that if one grain from the opposite side of the cob is brought forward to the center of the cob and the other one on the opposite end is brought forward again, if they meet and touch each other or overlap, that means there is a high shelling out percentage. So in 727, the shelling out percentage can be above 85%. Magav went on to explain the attractiveness of the 500 series variety, where he was standing in a green field of maize. So the 500 series variety that we were seeing is SC555, a new kid on the block. SC555 has wowed farmers across the country by having an attractive crop that is comparable to the crops that we get in the medium maturing varieties, which we term the 600 series or a Shumba. So this 500 series, SC555, is the advantage of having high yields compared to other varieties in its maturity group. It also has a closed tip, which is also an advantage in the fact that if we have late rains, chances of the late rains going inside the cob and causing cob rot are quite slim. This variety as well, 555, has a drooping effect, which is the ability to face downwards and be able to withstand late or intermittent rains that come at the tail off of the season. So you also mentioned that we have this variety, and as we go forward in the coming season, farmers should know that Sitco is an attractive, high-yielding, drought-tolerant maize hybrid in the early maturity group, which is commonly known as the Mbizi category. Magavu then went on to explain where he was showcasing a heap of SC657, which was established in the 2020-21 farming season. So the 657 is already at maturity, and he explained that harvesting has started and the cobs were looking attractive. He also explained that this is not the only 600 series variety we have. He explained that we have a wide range of 600 series varieties, where we have SC659, a flagship again, which has raised eyebrows and brought many smiles amongst farmers across the country in all the diverse groups of the commercial and communal farmers. We also have SC661, which is going to be launched this year. So we have SC665, SC659, SC657, SC649, as well as the other varieties that we had in that maturity group in previous years. Then Magavu went on to explain that these Sitco varieties, particularly the 657 that he was holding up against his hand again to measure its length, he was showing that it is about 30 centimeters in height and the variety can go above that. And we could also see the high row numbers that were on the cob. We could also see the attractiveness of the cob, where he mentioned that it was a shiny looking cob, owing to the fact that this variety is a flint variety, which means that it will do well even for green mealies. Magavu went on to mention that the farmer is in a business of harvesting his cobs and then taking the stover to feed his cattle. So it's a two-edged sword. With Sitco varieties, you are able to have many uses from your grain as well as your stover, and well, you will be able to maximize on productivity at different levels. Having heard that detailed explanation from the agronomist, we are now going to hear from the Ministry of Agriculture, Agri-Tech Extension Officer, who's going to speak about the varieties, as well as giving us a brief about the farmer who we have just heard from, Mr. Zoro. So we're going to hear from Agri-Tech their view of the varieties from Sitco and their advice to other farmers out there in terms of establishing these varieties. So Sitco is indeed the home of bumper harvest. As you have already seen from Mr. Zoro, his bumper harvest is already building up from the heaps of maize that we have seen. So let's hear what the Agri-Tech officer had to say.
Pamusoro ivarimi, ini ndinonzi Mukwende Eileen, ndiri murimisi weAgritex kuMasvingo district muMushagashe area ward 3. Nhasi tiri pamusha pavaPascal Dzoro anova murimi anorima mbeu dzesidhiko zvakanyanya. VaDzoro semunhu ari physically challenged, vanhu vakada kunzwisisa kuti vanozvigona sei nekuti produce yavo kana kuti mayields avo haatokombeki nemamwe mafamazi mazhinji ari munharaunda. But nenyaya yekuti vanorima mbeu dzesidhiko, mbeu dzavo mayields avo anenge akakwirira zvakanyanya. Saka 2018 sidhiko yakafarira kuita kwavaDzoro, ndokubva vauya kuna vaDzoro vakavati vanyore proposal yezvinhu zvavaida. VaDzoro vakandiaprocha somurimisi wavo, ndikavanyorera proposal yezvinhu zvandaifungidzira kuti zvingabatsira vaDzoro, zvinosanganisira bhoho, mombe dzokurimisa, pump nejojo tank. VaDzoro vakachererwa bhoho nesidhiko yavakainstalla pump, vakavapa generator 5 horsepower, vakavapa netengi rokuisa mvura, vakavapaipira mvura yavo kubva kubhoho kusvika pamba. Sidhiko yakapa vaDzoro 2 steers, ndingati majongosi maviri ekurimisa pamusoro pekuvadhirillira mvura. Sidhiko inotipa mavarieties ayo ese, tingati sepano tine 403, tine 419, tine 529, tine 555, tine 639, tine 719, tine 727. Dzese mbeu idzodzo takadzidyara pano. Madyarire anoita vaDzoro. VaDzoro vanowanzodyara nemvura yokutanga gore rose. Dzekutanga dzakadzvarwa musi wa4 October, dzepiri dzikadzvarwa musi wa6 October. Zvakadero mvura yanga yachizonaya musi wa5 October. Kureva kuti vavaita proper timing yekunaya kwemvura. Saka zvadaro vaDzoro vakadzvara chibage chese ichi vachishandisa rate ye300 kg per hectare compound D, zvekuti chero mukachiona munoona kuti chibage chakasvika, chibage chakataridza kuti chakagutsikana.
We've just heard from the Agritech Extension Officer about the Sidhiko varieties. So she gave a brief about the farmer, where she mentioned that the farmer, as we highlighted in the beginning of the presentation, got some assistance through Sidhiko's corporate social responsibility and the initiative of Sidhiko's marketing department and agronomists. So he managed to get a number of things from Sidhiko that include a borehole and a tank, as well as getting demonstration plot varieties to establish at his farm, having noticed that he is a serious, keen and hardworking farmer. The Agritech officer also mentioned that for Masvingo province, it is a province where the Sidhiko varieties do well and have been doing well over the years. She mentioned that the varieties that are recommended for that area range from the early maturity varieties, and depending on irrigation ability as well as the nature of the season, even the 600 and 700 series varieties have been doing well in Masvingo. Before I explain further, would like to invite questions in our chat box. Send through your questions so that we'll be able to respond to them through typed answers. And at the end of the session, we'll be able to have a time allocated for answering your questions. Please feel free to interact with us and send through your questions. So I was speaking about what the Agritech officer had been saying in the video that we were just seeing. So she also spoke about issues to do with the wide product basket that Sidhiko has, where she mentioned that Sidhiko has an ultra early maturing variety, SC301, a variety that matures within about 90 to 120 days, depending on altitude. She mentioned as well that we have 400 series varieties, 500 series varieties, where we have in the 500 series varieties, 513, 529, 555, and 557. In the 600 series, as we had from the previous speaker, our agronomist, Mr. Magavu, we have 661, 657, 659, 649. So we have a wide product basket, as was explained as well by the Agritech Extension Officer from Masvingo. So having heard that, as you send through your questions, please continue to send through your questions and comments so that we'll be able to interact with you during the course of this webinar. We only got one question so far that we managed to respond to, and the farmer was asking about the days to maturity that the agronomist had mentioned when he spoke about SC727. And in our response, we told the participant who had asked the question that the farmer had established the SC727 on the 10th of October, and our agronomist had highlighted that days to maturity differ depending on the altitude of the area. And in Masvingo, given the high heat units, the variety was able to mature much earlier. On that note, we are going to hear from the councillor who was present at the field day, and just to highlight that the field day was attended by 10 other neighboring farmers so that they can also witness visually what was going on and be able to cascade the message forward and imprint the images of the good Sitco varieties that were established.
Ini ndinoitwa Councillor Jadiel Chikore, ndiri pano papurazi yava Pascal Dzoro, vari murimi wakapa muenzaniso wekuti vanhu vakawana zvinhu zvekushandisa zvakakwana nembeu yakanaka yekurima vanokohwa zvakakwana. VaPascal Dzoro mumwe murimi anorarama nehurema, asi nekuda kwekubatsirwa kwakaitwa nekupuhwa mbeu nezvekuribatisa zvekuti arime, wakakwanisa kurima mbeu dzatiri kuona pano. Tinotenda zvikuru veSidco vanoshanda nesu muno muwadhi 3 muMasvingo. Wadhi inei yese tiri kukurudzira vanhu kuti varime mbeu dzakasiyana siyana, asi vaPascal Dzoro vakabatirira pambeu yeSidco yakapa muenzaniso wekuti vakava umwe wakakurira varimi vazhinji pakurima kwake negohwo raari kuwana kubudikidza nekurima mbeu dzisakambowanikwawo munzvimbo ino, nekuti nzvimbo yagara ichingonzi hairimwi Varieties anoenda kure, asi ivo vakatora mukana wekuvapa muenzaniso wekuti Varieties iwaya anoita muno. Vakarima mbeu ye727 nembeu inoitwa Shumba muno mikabudirira zvokuti ikava muenzaniso. Saka izvezvi takutokurudzira vamwe varimi kuti zvichibvira ngavakwanisewo kurima mbeu idzi vachitevedzera varimisi zvavanonga vachitaura kuti zvinodiwa pakurima mbeu ndezvipi, nokuti taona kuti dzinobudirira munzvimbo yedu.
We've just heard from the councillor. The councillor was explaining that there is a need for a farmer to plan well in advance of the season to make sure that inputs are availed and are available at the time of the season and avoid the rush hour. So he spoke about issues to do with the timeless availability of inputs and planting. He also commended Mr. Dzoro for having established varieties, having understood the nature of the season that was anticipated in his department. He also went on to mention that farmers should always be guided by their area in terms of selection of varieties that they want to establish for their area, and that Sitco is a wide product basket that they can choose from. On that note, would like to thank you all for joining us for this virtual field day. And at this point, we are getting into the question and answer segment where we are inviting you to send through your questions, and we will be explaining the questions and the answers to the questions that you will have asked. So as a form of response to some of the questions that we have received, we have a question here that came from Steph Tawandira. Steph is an agronomist in Lusaka Headlands area. He is one of the agronomists there, and he works hand in glove with farmers to make sure that we add value to farming enterprises across the country. So he was asking if we could explain on issues to do with weevils and weevil damage in terms of grain production, particularly in maize production. Why are there any varieties that are said to be more prone to weevil damage? So thank you very much, Sam, for that question. So what happens is when a variety reaches physiological maturity, we say that that variety has reached a point where there's no more accumulation of dry matter. There is no more growth that is going to be occurring. But the moisture content at that stage is at around 30% or above. So from that point of physiological maturity onwards, the farmer is supposed to leave that crop in the field to allow for the dry down period to occur, so that if you avoid harvesting a crop with high moisture and making it more prone towards once you put it in storage. So at that point, the crop is going to be allowed to dry down until it reaches about 14 to around 20%. So some farmers, depending on their area and their security against theft and other issues that can occur, they can harvest between 50 to 20% moisture. At this point, it doesn't mean that that crop is ready for storage. At that point, that crop still needs to lose more moisture until it reaches the moisture content of 12.5%. Once it reaches 12.5%, from that point onwards, the moisture loss that comes after that increases the chances of there being weed or damage, especially when the moisture content is below 10%, 9%. When you see your grain being shriveled, being shriveled, it means that chances of weed or damage occurring are also high. So we recommend farmers to harvest at the ideal time when the moisture content is recommended, which is at around 12.5% plus or minus, and not allow the grain to dry down further in the field, allowing it to be susceptible to issues to do with weevil damage. Also, you find that some varieties, particularly the one that Magavu was explaining, the SC657, which is a flint nature, semi-flint nature. So that variety has the ability to be hard, and it will also be able to withstand chances of weevil damage. But the trick is for you to harvest your crop and take it out of the field before incidences of weevil damage occur at a moisture level that is recommended for storage. The other question that we got from Wushe Muzenda, he asked about fall armyworm tolerant varieties. Yes, fall armyworm is a huge menace and has been for a couple of years. But having said that, the trick and the thing that you should take note of is for you to come in timeously with control measures to control fall armyworm before economic threshold levels have been reached. And farmers can only be able to do this after they have scouted their fields regularly. You need to be foot soldiers in your field and scout in a systematic way to make sure that fall armyworm doesn't go out of hand before you notice and spray for it. So as a rough rule of thumb, some farmers come in with a spray for fall armyworm at around 2 to 3 weeks. Then others will come in as the crop progresses following regular scouting. Breeding efforts are there to come up with varieties that are tolerant to fall armyworm damage, but currently there are no varieties that we can say outright are not going to be damaged by fall armyworm. The farmer needs to take the full responsibility of employing good agronomic practices to make sure that the crop is going to be safeguarded against chances of fall armyworm damage. So you need to make sure you take note of that. Another question we got here from Anonymous. Anonymous is asking, which varieties work well in Volta region in Ghana? Thank you very much for asking. And he went on to ask if this can be accessed through Seedco distribution. So we have outlets and distribution networks across the African globe, where you find that Seedco is in more than 15 African countries. So you find that in Ghana, we have representation there where Dr. Chagumuka will be able to assist. And after this webinar, we're going to contact this, this person can contact us on our email address, and we'll be able to send through some technical advice to assist. But just as a form of response to this inquiry, the varieties that can be established in Ghana are SC719, SC649, as well as SC419. These varieties have done well over the past years, with case studies and testimonials coming through from previous years. So engage our Ghana office, where there is Dr. Chagumuka and his team. You'll be able to assist with further technical assistance. So please send through your questions. We'll be responding through as we proceed with the presentation. We have a question here that we got from Arthur Musinga Shiri. So Arthur's question is, normally we have a challenge. We have a challenge of the informal sector selling maize that is pegged using Seedco branding. But mostly these are not Seedco varieties, and farmers end up facing challenges in their fields. How best as Seedco are we curbing this issue? And also, do we have a hotline to report such shenanigans? Thank you very much for that well-timed and important question. It gives us sleepless nights to know that there are people who are out there who are in the business of shortchanging farmers, giving them varieties that they claim to be Seedco varieties, when in actual fact they are not. It is actually maybe grain that has been taken from a silo somewhere, or harvested grain from a previous season and colored grain. So we really want to discourage this practice, because you are shortchanging another farmer and eating into the food sustainability of a household, as well as profitability of someone's cropping venture. So as Seedco, we have noted this over the past years, and we have, through our security department, embarked on different initiatives, where you find that last year, we even engaged the Zimbabwe Republic Police to conduct outreach programs to make sure that our farmers are conscientized on what a true Seedco bag looks like, and as well as the checkpoint of features that are on a bag that are going to make the farmer know that this is a variety that is really, I'm getting it from Seedco. And we also explained issues to do with there being a barcode and all the other features that are characteristic of a true Seedco bag. And having you, thank you for highlighting this. So we are also going to going into the other seasons, we're going to do outreach programs, we're going to do flyers, we're going to do the visual illustrations of what a Seedco bag should look like, so that farmers are not shortchanged. The other and best way that you can vet this is for you to make sure that you are buying from a reputable supplier, where you know that this is a reputable supplier whose reputation is on the line if they sell fake seed. So you go to reputable supplier, your farm and city, and a wide range of other agro dealers and accredited distributors of Seedco seed varieties. Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Arthur Musinga Shari. Thank you very much. We have another question here coming from Enoch Nyanyiwa. Enoch is asking, does Seedco's new variety SC555 have the same output with SC727? A good question indeed. So what happens is a maturity group has a yield potential that is associated with it. And the 7 series, being the late maturing variety product basket, has the highest yield potential that is expected of the maize varieties that you find from Seedco, followed by the 600 series, the 500 series, 400 and 300 series respectively. However, depending on a farmer's agronomic management of the crop, you find that sometimes you might have some varieties failing to reach the mark that has been set in terms of the average yield that they're going to get, owing to the fact that the management of the crop was poor. If the management was good, a variety in the 600 series might give you yields that might compete with varieties that are in the 700 series varieties, where a farmer in that later maturity group might not have given that variety all that it desires. So the 500 series is a high yielder, yes, but the yield potential is going to be well above 12 tons per hectare, but it will give you good yields that are comparable to the 600 series if managed well. So the trick is for a farmer to employ good agronomic practice as much as possible to unlock the genetic potential of the varieties. And on that note, I'd just like to say that farmers should know that the yield gap that exists in Zimbabwe and most African countries is quite huge of the attainable yield that farmers are getting on the farm versus the yield potential of the varieties that are available on the market. Where you find that in Zimbabwe, The yield potential ranges between 0.5 to 0.9 tons per hectare, when we have varieties that give yields of well above 10 tons. So there's a huge gap there, and that gap can only be bridged if farmers are going to employ good agronomic practices that are going to allow them to unlock the genetic potential of the varieties that they will have established. We have another question here that is coming from Anonymous, who is saying, is it necessary to plow the land if it's a virgin land before planting the varieties to achieve maximum yield? He also went on to say, also, what are some requirements of land prep techniques and post-planting activities to achieve maximum yield? Thank you very much for this long question that we are going to respond to. So in terms of land preparation, bearing in mind that we are moving hand in glove with sustainable agriculture initiatives, which speak to conservation agriculture, farmers should understand that we also advocate for the use of minimum or no-till planting, where a farmer is only going to disturb the area that they are going to establish their crop, which speaks to conservation agriculture initiative. So conservation agriculture is guided by 3 principles. Minimum soil disturbance, 1. The second one is permanent or above 30% ground cover at any given time, as well as crop rotations. So given that this field will be a virgin land, the farmer might decide to come in with a conventional method of tillage for the first year, where they turn over the soil and plow under problematic weed seeds that will be in the ground. After doing this, they can then come in with conservation farming initiatives, but there is no harm with going in with the conservation initiatives from the first year onwards, where you just come in and disturb the soil where you want to establish your crop. This is because this has been found to be beneficial and sustainable for the environment in a bid for us to embark on sustainable agriculture initiatives. Moving on to the second half of the question, where the farmer was asking, also, what are some required land prep techniques and post-planting activities to achieve maximum yield? So the land prep planting techniques we've alluded to, where some farmers this year, in a bid to move with the government programs, embarked on the Pumvuza programs, especially the resource-constrained farmers, where they just came in and dug holes in the specific planting stations that they were establishing their crops. But resource-endowed farmers, the farmers that have machinery, were using no-till and the strip-till planting. And moving on to other just general guide of the management of the crop, as has been asked by the farmer. So from establishment onwards, you need to make sure that if it's a rain-fed crop, the crop has been established using the effective rains that will have been established, received in that area, followed by good weed management as well as fertilizer management, where you come in with a guided fertilizer program based on soil analysis. Then after that, when your crop is growing, you need to come in with post-emergence herbicide management as well as regular scouting for insect pests and diseases. But you should also know that the establishment of varieties that are tolerant to problematic diseases is also going to safeguard your pocket against you purchasing a high amount of products to come in to control problematic diseases. So Sitco varieties are tolerant to resistant to problematic diseases that include your gray leaf spot, your maize streak virus. So this is something that you need to look at when you buy your crops before you establish any variety. The next question that we got is from Josephat. How does Sitco select plots for demonstration planting? Thank you very much. It's a good question. So at Sitco, we have a wide range of demonstration plots that we establish for different purposes. We have demos that we established as green milling demos to showcase the performance of varieties in the green milling category looking at maize. We also have demonstration plots that we established as roadside demonstration plots, where our purpose is to showcase the performance of Sitco varieties for those farmers who will just be passing through and all the other people, for them to appreciate the different varieties that Sitco has in its basket. We also have inland demos, where we established demonstration plots inside farm locations that are even outside of the roads, where our aim there is to showcase the performance of these varieties at different levels. So we establish demos for commercial farmers, for communal farmers, and as well as for for different types of farming groups, as well as the urban farmers, where you find that in the garden, there are some farmers who are growing Sitco varieties. So our demonstration plots are quite diverse, and we have a wide range of farmers that we establish demonstration plots for, but the main purpose is for us to showcase the performance of these varieties. And selection can be done through the Sitco agronomists, can be done through the Ministry of Agriculture agronomists, as well as other channels that can be used. But the purpose is for us to showcase across all the diverse farming groups and farming categories that are available in the country. We have a question here from Tafadzwa Jaya. Tafadzwa says, may you please unpack characteristics of the variety Tsuro? What are the positives? Thank you very much for bringing that one, Mr. Tafadzwa Jaya. So you find that the ultra early maturity variety Tsuro, SC301 and SC303 are varieties that were bred after the realization that climate change is real and it's a phenomenon that we are going to be living with for a while. So bearing that in mind, we bred these varieties in a bid to come in with shorter days to maturity, but not compromising on yield, a term which we referred to as a top left approach. So the 301 and 303 Tsuro varieties will mature in 100 to 120 days. In some areas, it will take about even 90, 95 days, depending on the altitude that we explained earlier. It's something that is going to affect the heat units for an area, hence the days to maturity. So the Tsuro varieties, SC301, 303, which are ultra early maturity varieties, mature earlier than the 400 series varieties, which are very early in maturity. So 301 and 303, in terms of its characteristics, it gives you a sizable crop with a high row number. The yield potential will range between 6 to about 8 tons per hectare, depending on the management practices that the farmer will have embarked on. So in a season where you find that it is anticipated for there to be dry spells, a farmer can choose to establish SC301. And further than that, a farmer can even choose to do 301 in order to multiply the number of cropping programs that they're embarking on so that they increase profitability in their farming venture. Another farmer might want to do it as a green mealy variety, where he wants to be first on the market so they can establish that variety and sell it off because it will mature in the earliest possible time. And it is also quite drought tolerant, where you find that it can be established in those regions where you find that some farmers might say, no, these regions are not for maize, they are for small or traditional grains because of the nature of that agroecological region. Here we are speaking particularly to region 4, region 5A or 5B. So those farmers can still establish this ultra early maturity variety and be able to get high acceptable yields in their area, given their cropping region. On that note, I would like to thank you all for the questions that you sent through and for the interactions that we have had on this platform. And I would like to implore on you to join us for future virtual field days that we are going to be conducting, with the next one being expected early next week, and the dates are going to be shared. So in a form of a summary, I'd just like to summarize what we saw during this presentation. But before I do that, I've got a burning question here that we have received. The question is from Mr. Ushe, who's asking when Mr. Zoro applied fertilizer 2 or 3 application. So Mr. Zoro, in interactions with him, he indicated that they did 2 split applications of fertilizers. Given the nature of the rains that were received this year, he found it prudent for him to apply in 2 splits to avoid the high incidence of leaching, and they applied ammonium nitrate. Then we have another question here from Anonymous. It's about basal fertilizer at planting. So which basal fertilizer should we apply at planting? So the basal fertilizer should be guided by the cropping question, where for maize, as the recommended fertilizer for maize is your 7-14-7 NPK ratio 7-14-7, which is commonly termed compound D. But we want farmers to move out of the business of buying fertilizers by their common names, but rather by their nutrient constitution, because the nutrients are what you're going to be providing to your crops. Then the last question here is from Enoch Maniwa. Do we require soil samples in Sitco varieties? Thank you very much. It's a good closing question. We require soil sampling for any cropping venture, and especially for Sitco varieties, to reach their maximum attainable yields as well as yield potentials. So soil analysis is a bracket that speaks to you doing custom-made fertilizer recommendation, as well as understanding the acidity and alkalinity of your soil. So it is required for any cropping venture for you to know whether or not you are applying enough in abundance or shortchanging your crop. So it's a very important question. Thank you very much, Enoch Nyaniwa, for that one. So in conclusion, the virtual field day that we're seeing today was conducted at a communal farm in Masvingo, at number 199 Mushagashi West in Masvingo, at Mr. Pasco Doro's farm. So Mr. Pasco Doro established SC301 419 555 659 657 as well as 727, which means they managed to establish the ultra early, very early, medium to late maturity varieties in the Sitco's product basket, and they did well. Establishment started in October, and the crops were all rain-fed. Owing to the nature of the season that we had, the crops have already reached physiological maturity for the very first established crops of 727 and 657, while the other varieties in the early maturity group are still approaching maturity. We also talked about the yield attributes of the varieties, where we spoke about the 3 yield components. And take note of these. The first one is the high row number. The second one is the shelling out percentage, where we say we are producing maize for grain, not for the cob size. And we also spoke about the attractiveness and length of the cob, where constantly our agronomist was speaking and showing you the length of the cob versus the length of his hand, showing that the Sitco varieties are indeed attractive. Then it was mentioned that the Sitco varieties can work in diverse cropping programs, where you find that it can be used for green mealies, owing to the good taste that comes with the varieties, particularly 657, which was explained, and 555, 719 as well, giving an attractive cob. And we spoke about our varieties being suitable as well for you to use the stover, particularly after harvesting, as stock feed. So it's a one-stop shop. Sitco is indeed a one-stop shop for all your cropping programs. So the purpose of Field Days is for you to imprint these images in your mind, so that in your next purchase, you are guided accordingly. And remember that Sitco is a variety for every farmer. On that note, I would like to thank you all for joining us during this virtual Field Day, which was conducted in Masvingo. Thank you very much for the questions. It was an interactive session indeed, and your input and feedback is greatly valued. So before I close off, I just have one more question that we got here from Judith Magadzire. Which variety can I grow in winter for green mealies? I am in Chegu too. Thank you very much. It's a very good question to close with. And this is the last question. So for green mealies, we find that at this time, farmers who are establishing green mealies are choosing from a wide array of options or varieties. So we find that in this time of the season, you need to look at the following factors. First of all, if you're going to be establishing green mealies, at this time, it's no longer the time for you to be thinking of establishing it under 100% rain-fed conditions. Why? Because the season is tailing off, and those varieties will not make it to physiological maturity using rain-fed water only, especially in Zimbabwe, where our rainfall season is tailing off. So you need to have irrigation, and the irrigation should be enough for you to establish your crop and for it to reach physiological maturity without undergoing moisture stress. The second thing is to do with heat units, where we speak about a decline in heat units from December the 22nd onwards, which is to say January, February, March onwards, until we reach the winter months, the heat units will be declining. So the rate of growth of those varieties will be reduced, meaning there are chances that if you don't choose your variety well, it will get into the winter months. And if it's in an area which is prone to frost, you might incur frost damage, because maize is not tolerant to frost, especially in frost-prone areas. So it's important for you to take note of that. So if you're going to be establishing, the advice is for you to establish early maturing varieties as soon as possible, Yes, some farmers are establishing medium maturity varieties, and farmers in those areas that are not prone to frost, those pockets of the country that are frost-free, they can still establish even their 700 series variety, because 727 does give the longest and most attractive crop. But you need to be guided accordingly. I would encourage farmers to engage the Sitco agronomists in their province for more explanations on the varieties for green mealies that they can establish. Remember that Sitco is the real deal. Sitco is the home of bumper harvest, and Sitco is available on different social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. So you need to engage us in these different platforms with inquiries so that we can provide you with technical advice and guidance to unlock the genetic potential of your varieties. To top it off, we have an agronomist in every province in Zimbabwe. So you have somewhere to go to and speak with an agronomist so that you can get technical advice. So there are 1,000 reasons for crop failure, but there are only 2 reasons for successful cropping: access to the right seed and the employment of good agronomic practices. On that note, I would like to thank you and invite you to join us in future webinars as we go through the country, across the country, showcasing the performance of Sitco varieties. Thank you very much.